What up, Wizards? It's Dev, Mtg. We like the magic stuff. And hey, kid, you want some spoilers? I probably should have worn like a coat for that bit. But point is, we got more new Capenna previews. That's why you clicked on the video. So let's go ahead and get into those. Starting with, as usual, the lower rarity stuff. But there was a lot of very good stuff in the lower rarities today, as usual. Now, we'll start the day with the classic card Dev is too excited about, but at least he can admit it. Right? Let's look at Deal Gone Bad. DGB is 4 mana, 3 and a black for an instant. Target creature gets -3/-3 till end of turn, and target player mills 3 cards. You know, the deal definitely did go bad. Why is this nameless inversion double the price than it would normally be? Dev, why do you like this card? It's total absolute booty. Yeah, the card's bad. Again, I can admit that, but as a deck builder, I've wanted this kind of exact effect on a card a couple of times in the last few years. These green-black self-mill piles are trying so hard. They're trying their little hearts out to be decks. They have multiple win conditions. Once you get 10, 20 creatures in the yard, they can actually start doing stuff. But the problem is they don't really play well against anything, especially decks with creatures. So I wanted a removal spell that mills me. Like, I probably told myself that I wanted this spell, I don't know, half a dozen times over the last year. So I'm glad to have it, but again, the rate is, not like this, right? I didn't want it at this rate, but I guess I'll begrudgingly take it and play it on stream in some weird green-black self-mill thing. That's not going to work, but at least this brings it like a quarter step closer to actualization. But I gotta say, Whack is objectively the better black removal spell from today. It doesn't look like it at first, but I promise that it is. This is 4 mana, 3 and a black for a sorcery. This spell costs 3 less to cast if it targets a white creature. Target creature gets -4/-4 till end of turn. Well, the card does kind of look whack at first. I'm not going to make any of the other obvious jokes I could make because I want to stay monetized. But at the same time, this is probably just a worse Ray of Enfeeblement. You know, Ray of Enfeeblement is at least instant speed. We get to play that in sideboards for another 6 months or whatever it is. So that'll probably be what we continue to do for the time being. But this card probably will have its day in the sun. But probably just in sideboards, and even then it's still sorcery speed, so I don't really care that much about Whack. But we'll move on to Riveteers Decoy. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 3/1 human warrior, and it must be blocked if able. You can blitz this in for 3 and a green. Now, I bring this up because these lure effects are always better than they look. I mean, actually, it feels like don't get many of these anymore. I feel like we haven't gotten a good one in a while, and this is a really good one. It just costs a couple of mana. And if you don't want to wait for it to attack, yeah, it costs 4 mana. But still, you get to blitz it in with haste. It might trade with something on the way out. You'll definitely draw a card when all those creatures block it. So, I don't know. It's actually not as bad as it might look to some at first glance. And again, we just don't get these effects very often anymore. So, in a mono green aggro deck, this is a 2-drop with 3 power, so it's a kind of serviceable as a 2-drop in some ways. But later on in the game, you drop this on a pretty full board, and suddenly you just kind of win the game. That's what people forget about these. This is kind of 2 to 4 mana for I win the game, depending on the board state. So this is actually a pretty serious card, and it's worth pointing out. Another cool uncommon from today is Citizen's Crowbar. This is 1 and a white for an equipment. When it ETBs, you create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token, and then you attach Crowbar to it. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has white tap, sacrifice Citizen's Crowbar, destroy target artifact or enchantment. You can also equip this for 2 if you feel like doing that, because I guess this can be an equipment that just gives a creature +1/+1, which is like serviceable, right? But what this actually is in disguise is 3 mana sorcery speed, create a 1/1 and disenchant. That's kind of what this actually is. And there's a lot of ways in which this card is actually pretty versatile, you know? Like, if you just play it for 2 mana and you immediately blow up an artifact or enchantment, the fact that it leaves behind a 1/1 is actually very sweet. You know, it makes a token for the tokens decks. It procs Alliance. It's good for sacrificing stuff to casualty while still having something in your main deck. In limited, mostly, that busts artifacts and enchantments up. But I wouldn't be surprised to see the sort of equipment-centric white decks, or Boros decks more likely, actually want to play like a copy of this card or so. It gives you more board presence than just an equipment, right? Giving you the 1/1, I think, is actually a big deal on this. If you don't have a thing to bust up and you can pass it around on stuff, right? So, I don't know. I actually think this is actually kind of sweet. I hate to use the word actually a million times, but, you know, I really do think that this card could have some legs, but probably relatively short legs, and I'm not sure that it does much in standard, but I do think it's a better card than it looks. It's also just cool that it's a crowbar. Can I just point out that that's cool? You know, you can go around hitting people with crowbars. I've been hit with a crowbar, by the way. I have a scar above my left eye because I have been hit by a crowbar. Full story? No, I'm not going to give it to you. Next up, Riveteer Collector, though. This is 2 mana. Speculate in the comment sections on why I've been hit with a crowbar. Or maybe don't. Am I asking for it? But anyway, Riveteer Collector is next. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 3/1 Viashino Rogue. When it dies, create a treasure token. You can also blitz it in for 2 and a red. So again, just probably like more solid than it looks. You know, it's a 2 mana, 3 power guy. You know, I just talked about those. Pretty decent for a mono red aggro deck just on rate alone. But a 2 mana 3/1 is not enough to where, you know, an aggro player can eat. You need a little bit more on the plate than that, and this gives you that, right? When it dies, create a treasure token is actually kind of a big deal. I like this in sort of a theoretical big red deck, you know, a deck that wants to play a fairly decently statted creature that can attack well against control, can trade well in combat against other decks, right? But also when it does die, it ramps you into those 5 and 6 drops in your big red deck. I really like the idea of this thing, and also like the idea of blitzing it in and creating a treasure token and drawing a card. Maybe trade with a creature in combat, maybe bolt your opponent's face, maybe kill their planeswalker in combat or something, and draw a card and create a treasure token. I think there's plenty of value on this card. I may have called this card Collector. It's actually Riveteers Requisitioner, I'm getting word now. But anyway, we will move on to Boon of Safety. This is 1 of 2 protection spells that I want to look at today. This is just a single white mana for an instant. Put a shield counter on target creature. And scry 1. That's not too shabby. I think there might be better spells than standard, but not for 1 white mana. And there's plenty of decks that could use this. There's a mono-white Magecraft deck. There's a blue-white sort of spells deck, a tempo deck that might want to use this. But a couple of cards from now, might as well just look at it next, to be honest. We'll look at a card that I think is probably better than this, all things considered. But again, in a mono-white deck or a deck that doesn't have access to green or blue mana, then I could definitely see this being something that you absolutely want to play. We've been looking for a replacement, right, for multiple now, 1 mana protection spells in white decks. We've been using like Shaziri's Shelter now for a while, and this is just probably a better card than that. Let's go ahead and look at the other card I'm referring to. This is Slip Out the Back Jack. This is just a blue mana for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature. It phases out. That is a very, very good. It's not exactly as good or as bad sometimes as a Snakeskin Veil. Sometimes it's going to be better than a Snakeskin Veil. But this can't, you know, just barrel through a removal spell and your creature still does combat damage that turn. That's kind of the trade-off here, is that if it happens during combat on your turn, or even on their turn, your creature's not going to trade with the creature that's blocking or blocked by it. So that could be an issue, but I still think that this is, you know, a blue Snakeskin Veil, and that's going to be good enough for the, you know, blue tempo decks, the blue-white tempo decks, and even the blue-green tempo decks that might want to play some split between this and Snakeskin Veil, because Snakeskin Veil, again, you're going to do the damage in combat more often with a card like that, but this is going to protect from Meat Hook Massacres and other sweepers and whatnot. There's a lot of situations that this protects against that a card like a Snakeskin Veil might not necessarily. So I just think this is actually sneakily one of the absolute best cards of the day, and I'm not even joking. Seriously, it's a great card. Now let's look at Inspiring Overseer next. 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/1 Angel Cleric with flying, and when it ETBs, you gain a life and draw a card. So I guess people weren't playing that 3 mana Dwarf enough. See, the exact same casting cost, the exact same PT. And it's got like somewhat relevant creature types, but like nobody played that card, even in like teleportation circle decks. But now they're just going to give it flying. It's like, oh, the trade-off with that last card is that it gained a life and didn't have flying, so it wasn't strictly better than Cloudkin Seer. This is just a strictly better Cloudkin Seer in a different color. So will you play it now? Huh? It's an angel, a 3-drop angel. You want those, right? Yes, I do. So like, and it's a cleric, which is also a relevant creature type for the deck that wants to play it. So it's just an upgrade to an existing card that was already in standard. Will you play it now? Yeah, I'll play it on stream. I'll play it in like janky decks and stuff, but we'll see if it's good enough. But I've wanted a 3-drop angel forever, right? The angel deck is actually kind of interesting when it comes to blinking stuff. So there's plenty of things with awesome ETB triggers in the angel deck, and this is another one of them now. So I don't know, like maybe it's just barely playable, but you know, again, in a very fringe C tier. Sometimes you see it on Arena Way, but I'm actually fairly excited about this card. It's one of my favorite like commons in the set so far. I know I don't sound like it, but maybe I'm just jaded at this point. But a 3-mana thing with 2 power that flies and draws a card and gains life. It's like, how much gravy do you want on a card? This is a lot of it. But these are my videos, and I get to pick favorites, and my favorite uncommon of the day is Crew Captain. This is 3 mana, just 3 mana, Jund colors, black, green, red, for a 4/2 human warrior with haste, and it has indestructible as long as it entered the battlefield this turn. It's really good for 3 mana. I keep looking at this card and thinking it should cost 4 mana, and that at a 4 mana rate it would still be playable, right? But at 3 mana, this card is more than playable. Now, you won't always have the mana for it on turn 3, obviously, but if you do, then on curve, this is phenomenal, right? There's a lot of 4-drop 4-power hastes in this format that people are playing. You know, people play Ulvenwald Oddity, people play Thundering Raiju from time to time, and that's effectively a 4-power haste thing. People played Questing Beast over and over back in its day, so 4-mana 4-power haste is kind of a benchmark. This is a 3-mana 4-power haste that always gets to swing for free. Always. And like, it's not like, oh, it gains indestructible when it attacks as long as it entered the battlefield. No, it's just, it's got indestructible. Your opponent can't do anything about it except for maybe exile at the turn it comes into play. And even then it's Vanishing Verse proof because it's multicolored. So just a very sick looking little beater right here. And it makes these Jund decks look kind of scary. But let's move on to the rares and mythics from today. At the halfway point of the video here, let's look at Undercover Operative, 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for a 0/0 Shapeshifter Rogue. You may have Undercover Operative enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it enters with a shield counter on it if you control that creature. So neat little clone variant. Seems like there's a clone variant in just about every set, and this one might be one of the better ones in a long time. You have to copy one of your own things to get the shield counter, but I do think a shield counter is great. Like I think a shield counter is probably better than it looks, and it looks pretty good, right? So I do like this thing a good bit, but there's still a reason it's like the first rare that we're looking at today. These have a hard time seeing a whole lot of standard play at the end of the day. They have in the last few years. We've already got a few clones in standard that aren't seeing play. I just don't know that this is going to be the one that breaks the mold. But I, again, will say that a shield counter is some really, really good insurance. It's not quite hexproof or anything, but it's worse than hexproof, better than ward. Probably, right? So I do like this card a good bit, but and I do tend to get excited about clones, but I can't get too excited about potential standard playability because I'm not sure that there is much. But at this point, the all clone commander deck is really coming together. They printed enough at this point. Let's take a look at Structural Assault next. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a sorcery. Destroy all artifacts. Then Structural Assault deals damage to each creature equal to the number of artifacts that were put into graveyards from the battlefield this turn. So a super Shatterstorm that on the right commander table can also blow up the entire board. So that's pretty cool. In standard, this could be okay in sideboards. I think this is mostly a sideboard only card. But one thing I don't think I've mentioned yet, which is weird because I tend to mention this all the time in other videos, is that I think that these cards like, Horde Hauler and this probably get better a few months from now. We know that later on this year we're going to get not only a Dominaria set, probably has a couple of good artifacts in it, but we'll also get the Brothers War set, which I'm like more jacked for than I've been for a Magic product in a long time. But the Brothers War set is definitely going to have like a billion artifacts in it. So like, these cards probably get better in that environment. But even up to that point, it's probably still just a sideboard card. But for now, a sideboard, blow up all the artifacts. And yeah, if you want a sweeper, I guess you can play a deck with a bunch of treasure tokens in it. Use those treasure tokens to cast this. Blow up any incidental Esika's Chariots that are around and all the creatures that are on the board. Like, yeah, this could be playable as a sweeper in a big red deck or something. But for the most part, again, I think we're mostly looking at a sideboard piece here that will see some play. Oh, and if I didn't make this clear, again, on a stacked enough commander table, this card is just stupid. Probably is going to see some play there. But we will move on to Soul of Emancipation next. This is 7 mana, 4 and Bant. That's a blue, a green, and a white for a 5/7 avatar. When it ETBs, destroy up to 3 other target non-land permanents. Yay! For each of those permanents, its controller creates a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying. Boo! This doesn't even have flying. It'd be nice if you could block one of the angels, but a lot of times I think your opponent might be like, "Oh, you blew up my 3 best things. Fly in for 9 and in the game." Like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I don't know. This could be a really sweet reanimation target, so long as you have like a sweeper cocked and loaded the same turn. That could work, right? So I'm not like totally putting it past this card to see some play, because blowing up 3 whatever you want when it enters the battlefield is actually a really, really powerful ability. But I just don't want to give him the angels. And yeah, if you're being a smart aleck, you can blow your own stuff up and get like 9 power. So in a way, this reanimation spell could bring 14 power into play on your side. Like, yeah, cool. You blow up 3 treasure tokens or whatever. Seems nice. So I want to try it in that capacity. If anything, in your reanimator deck, you get the option, right? When it comes time to reanimate this thing, do I want a bunch of power? Do I want to blow up 2 of my own things and get 2 angels, blow up my opponent's thing and give them 1 angel, because who cares, right? Or is it a dire situation? I got to blow up 3 of their things, you know? Or is it a dire situation in terms of combat? And if I blow these 3 things up and make 3 angels, then do I suddenly have the upper hand? Am I the beatdown then? You know, like this card is cool to think about. And again, I think that in like a reanimator deck, this could probably see some amount of play. But at the end of the day, it's probably bulk, but it doesn't mean there aren't some cool things that can be done. But let's look at another Bant card that I really kind of like, but I'm going to probably talk negatively about for a little while. That is Rigo, Streetwise Mentor. This card is for some reason $20 right now on pre-order. It is Bant colors, a white mana, and then a green-white hybrid and a blue-white hybrid. So you can play it in a mono-white deck if you want to. It's a 2/2 legendary cat citizen, so you know I'm into it, and it ETBs with a shield counter on it. Whenever you attack a player or planeswalker with 1 or more creatures with power 1 or less, draw a card. So the 1 or more makes me not like that. I want to attack my opponent with 3 1/1s on turn 3 and draw 3 cards. Is that too much to ask? Is that too broken? Yeah, maybe. It probably is. But this thing is shockable. It's very fragile, removable by so many different spells in Standard right now, except, I guess, Vanishing Verse. But it is still neat, right? In your mono-white deck, you can draw a card a turn off of your 1 power guy attacking, but I'm not even sure that mono-white plays a lot of 1 power attackers right now, and a lot of even its 1 power guys can get bigger. So I don't know. I really want to like this. I think it's a really sweet commander or brawl card, and I want to try it out in various decks. You know, like the Tetsuo Yumazawa deck and like Historic. I want to try this out in, but ultimately it's probably not the best card in the world. But I like legendary cats. I like when they don't cost too much to play, and I like when they draw cards, and I like when they enable and reward my stupid weenie strategies. I love playing 1-drops and 1-power dudes that don't do much. For some reason, I love that. It's decent in a tokens deck. But again, remember, you're never going to draw more than 1 card a turn. So that's kind of poo-poo. So don't get too excited. But I do think the card is sweet. A mono-white thing that can draw a card a turn is nice. Nothing wrong with that. So, but again, this can go in all kinds of decks and do some real work for you. So maybe I'm crazy. Maybe the card is actually incredible and it's just a functional one-sided Howling Mine for the tokens player or something. Like, there are definitely a lot of things to like about this card, but is it going to end the world? Nah. So let's re-go on to the next card, which is Even the Score. This is X and 3 blue for an instant, but it costs 3 blue less to cast if an opponent has drawn 4 or more cards this turn. You draw X cards. It's actually sweet. It's like a stroke of genius, but in some ways worse and in some ways better. It's not as easy to cast, but sometimes it's going to be way easier to cast. So there's that. You know, if your opponent's drawn 4 cards in a turn, that's really good. They're not going to do that very often, but in case they do, then suddenly you can pay 4 mana, catch right up to them, or 5, 6, 7, whatever you got at instant speed. The reason that I bring this card up so somewhat late into the video is because of the instant speed. I do think that things like, say, Memory Deluge are probably just better cards for any blue control deck to want to play, but at the same time, even with the somewhat steep 3 blue casting cost, I think this card is worth keeping an eye on for certain control decks, because draw X cards at instant speed is always really good to be able to do. You know, look at the scalability on this. How many times have you played against a control deck that had 13, 14 mana out? Me, personally, in the last like 6 months or so, literally countless times. More times than I can count to. because I'm kind of a dum-dum, but, you know, still a lot of times. And if those players had access to this at instant speed and they could just draw like 8 at the end of my turn or something, I probably would just scoop every time. So this is actually a really, really good Magic card, but whether it makes the cut in control decks is, you know, that remains to be seen. Let's move on to Meeting of the Five. This is a silly Magic card here. This is 3 in Wooburg, so it costs 8 to cast, 3 in 1 of each color for a sorcery. Exile the top 10 cards of your library. You may cast spells with exactly 3 colors from among them this turn. Add white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green, Wooburg twice. Spend this mana only to cast spells with exactly 3 colors. So this is a massively fixed, and by fixed I mean neutered, Emergent Ultimatum. That's what it reads like to me. You can't even cast the spells without paying their mana cost. It gives you mana to cast spells, but you're probably only going to cast like, 2, maximum 3 spells with this. So what do you get, like 1 mana value off of it a lot of the time? If that, this is probably not a very good Magic card, but it could potentially be an I win button for these, 5-color control decks. Even then, you have to tap out on your turn for it, and it's not uncounterable, and you might still whiff. You have to in a control deck. I don't know, man. In your control deck, are you really able to play this? Are you able to fit the conditions of basically every single card in your deck being at least 3 colors? And then, if every card in your deck is 3 colors, then what does your curve look like the first couple of turns of the game? I want to like this card a whole lot. But again, even though like I'm kind of pooping on it a little bit, even though it's incredibly hard to enable, is how I really should be putting it. If you can cast a card and get like 3 things off of it, it's very good. So, I could see the card ending the game once actually resolved, but boy, you got to do some stuff to get there. The reason I point this card out so late in the video, kind of like the last card, is because the text box is so incredibly powerful, but the deck building implications for a card like this are so ridiculous that it almost seemed like a joke that they printed this at some point. But, it's going to seem like a meme up until somebody resolves it against you and they just win immediately. So who knows? We're either looking at a bulk rare that's one of the bigger memes in the set, and they're just like, hey, remember how good Emergent Ultimatum was? Here's a card that's terrible in comparison. It's like the opposite of Emergent Ultimatum, that went and got multicolored cards. This looks at the top 10 for, it tutored for monocolored. This looks at the top 10 for multicolored. So it's like opposite day, way worse Emergent Ultimatum, but I still want to play it on stream. Don't you, fellow content creators? And maybe, just maybe, this is one of the better pieces in the format. We just don't know it yet. Or maybe it's waiting on the right cards, but I don't know. This time, guys, I doubt it. I can't wait to cast this for 8 mana and get to cast one thing off of it. All 5 families meet and they can't get anything done. This is typical. But let's move on to Sanctuary Warden. Yeah, this card's all the way up here in the video too. I actually think this is kind of decent. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 white for a 5/5 Angel Soldier with flying. And it ETBs with 2 shield counters on it. Whenever it ETBs or attacks, you may remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker you control. If you do, draw a card and create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. This is stacked. This is another really good reanimation target. There's 3 of those today. We'll look at another one in a second, but I really like this. Usually 6 mana creatures aren't the absolute best reanimation targets, because a lot of reanimation spells cost 5, so, what are you really accomplishing? But in this case, I think this is actually very sweet, guys. And they kind of pushed it a little bit. You can remove a counter from any creature. You can remove a counter from a planeswalker. There's plenty of black, white, and Esper decks that play walkers. I don't think this makes the cut in those decks, but it is worth noting that if this is a reanimation target, or even just you play it out of your hand, it gets 2 shield counters. That's 2 instances of a sort of indestructibility, which is really very, very sweet. It's so good. You want investments like this to be protected. And this is 2 shield counters protects it. And even if you remove one of the shield counters to immediately draw a card and make a 1/1, there's still an instance of effective indestructibility on the thing. So I think this is way better than it might look. A 6 mana investment is very steep, but for that 6 mana, you get a lot. When I see something like this that protects itself twice and draws cards and makes dudes, I'm going to get a little excited about it. Let's move on to Titan of Industry, which is a hilarious name. I like what they did here. It is 7 mana, so that's even more than the last card. 4 and 3 green for a 7/7 elemental with reach and trample. And when it ETBs, you choose 2. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Target player gains 5 life. Create a 4/4 green Rhino Warrior creature token, or put a shield counter on a creature you control. Again, how much value do you need from your reanimation target? This is probably an even better reanimation target than the last one, because this too can protect itself. But do be careful, because if you go to put the shield counter on it, while that ability's on the stack, your opponent can kill this. So it's not quite as good in some ways. It doesn't just have a shield counter, right? You have to put that ability on the stack, which is going to lead to some problems, but still, getting to choose 2 of these means that you basically get value no matter what. Even if your opponent does have a removal spell and you try to put the shield counter on, you're still going to get like a 4/4 Rhino. Right? Or destroy their amazing artifact or enchantment, whatever it is. If you're way behind against aggro or something and they somehow have the removal spell for this, you still gain 5 life. So, so many cool things about this card. And again, as a reanimation target, or blink, I say that again, you blink this to great effect, but as a reanimation target, my lord, you get a 7/7 with 2 really good keyword abilities. In this case, trample matters an awful lot on a reanimation target, but getting to pick 2 of these and they're all very good, yes. And the way, by the way, that it's worded and ordered here, you can make the 4/4 and put the shield counter on it, I think. So that's also something to note. So just a sweet little card here. And even though 7 mana is an awful lot, I've been looking for good reanimation targets in this format for a while. We need something other than just Hullbreaker Horror. And this fits the bill. We'll move on, I suppose. Wow, we're in our top 3 already. That was, I guess, technically the number 3 card of the day. But we'll move on to Tenacious Underdog. I've been excited about this card all day. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 3/2 human warrior. You can cast Tenacious Underdog from your graveyard using its Blitz ability, and that Blitz ability is 2 and 2 black and pay 2 life. So Little Mac is awesome, dude. A 2 mana 3/2 that isn't Bloodghast or anything, Well, I guess Bloodghast is 2 mana 2/1. This at least has better stats, but this isn't Bloodghast, but it can block. A lot of creatures like this cannot block, your Skyclave Shades or whatever. None of them can block. This can. It's really, really sweet. Now, if you end up blitzing it, then it's going to sack into turn, so you're not really worried about blocking with it. But the first time it's in play, the first time you play from your hand, it can block, which is actually, again, a kind of a break from tradition with cards like this. 2 life and 4 mana for that matter are steep, but I still think they're more than worth playing this. I mean, this could replace white. Not the color, but like the creature white in the mono black decks right now. I really think mono black aggro is shaping up to be a real deck with Blade of the Oni and a bunch of other cards that we've seen in the last few sets. And even in this set, mono black aggro might be real again very soon, and this is going to be an important piece for it. This it's kind of like a phoenix, in some ways for mono red decks that can keep coming back from the graveyard. Black needs a piece like this, and they often get it, but they haven't had a real good piece like this in a while. Skyclave Shade is a pretty decent option, but this effectively just has haste out of your graveyard and draws you a card when it dies. Now, it's susceptible to things like Vanishing Verse, and your opponent will very much want to Vanishing Verse this, but, in the meantime, drawing you a card every turn is still going to be worth the investment in the life that you pay for it and all that against control decks. It's kind of like having a creature land. Like they can sweep the board or whatever, but you still got an option to attack every single turn. You don't have to wait a turn for this to attack or anything. And again, it's giving you card advantage every turn. It's drawing you an extra card every turn when you play it out of your yard. Just what a sick Magic card here, and I think it's easily one of the better cards of the day, and I shouldn't have to explain that too much. Even though, again, the cost is relatively steep, the upfront cost of getting to play in the first place is great in terms of what stats you're actually getting, and once the game ends up going long, this will just win the game for you some of the time. So definitely not only one of my favorite cards of the day subjectively, but I think objectively one of the best cards too. But I think the actual best card of the day is Endless Detour. This is Bant colors, a green, a white, and a blue for an instant. The owner of target spell, non-land permanent, or card in a graveyard puts it on the bottom or top of their library. So look at all of the things that this card does. It kind of counters a spell and often puts it on the top of your opponent's library, which is, by the way, extremely annoying. This is Memory Lapse. This is Memory Lapse you have to jump through hoops for, but it's still Memory Lapse, a card that was just banned in Historic, so that's good. Even at 1 extra mana and harder to cast. Memory Lapse is still a very annoying card. But you can also just target a non-land permanent during combat or something with this, so that's also great. The tempo generated by this is just unbelievable. But you can also save your own things with it if you want to, which I think is going to be important some of the time. You know, if your opponent has the removal spell for your Planeswalker or something, you just put it on top of your library. It sucks that you don't really get a draw step, but if it comes down to saving your Planeswalker, I think you'll probably do that because your Planeswalker is probably better than anything you'll draw the next turn anyway. So, you know, whether it's saving your own stuff or very much more likely bouncing your opponent's spells or permanents to the top of their library, yeah, that's very, very good. It's extremely versatile. And it's also interesting, last thing I'll point out, is that, first of all, this is technically graveyard hate. Technically, but I guess your opponent's probably just going to put it on top of their library if you target something in their graveyard. But you can target something in your graveyard and put it on top of your library. That means that if you have 2 copies of this, then you effectively cannot deck, which is cool, right? You can even do it at instant speed. So if you don't have any cards in your library at all, once you go to draw your card, just if you're playing on Arena, make sure you set a stop on your upkeep before you draw the card. But just cast this and put a copy of this from your graveyard on top of your library, and then just cast the copy of this that you drew that turn and put the copy that you cast on top of your library. And you just keep doing that, and you will never, ever deck, which is probably the actual joke inherent in the name of the card. So that's everything from today, and the set is still shaping up really nicely. You know, we got a bunch of really good reanimation targets today. Yet another good, like, 3-mana instant speed, you know, guild spell that's probably going to see a lot of play in Standard, and a bunch of really good commons and uncommons, and you know I'd like to see that. So just, I've seen some people say they're not super excited about this set, and I don't get it. To me, this set looks amazing so far, but I think I'm going to do an entire video grading this set, and maybe do that video for each set from here on out. But it's something I'm thinking of. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep doing videos if they don't give me my internet back. I still don't have the internet. Not really. Not the real, actual internet, but we'll figure it out one day, and we'll stream as soon as we do. I keep promising you that, and I mean it. I mean it on my heart, on my life. I will stream as soon as I can. But if you want to, follow me on Twitch over there. It's twitch.tv/SBMTGDev. You want to help out on Patreon, it's patreon.com/SBMTG. Links to these in the descriptions. And, of course, do all the YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe if you haven't done that yet for more spoiler content. Top 25, top 10 sleepers, all the stuff. But anyway, just get down there in the comments section. It's your go now. Let me know how you felt about all these today, all the takes, anything I missed, blah-de-blah. I'm all ears. I do read your comments, so don't be too mean down there. I see you being mean. Actually, there's only like one dude that's ever mean. All of you are actually incredibly nice. I have like the best. I'm very fortunate. I have the best YouTube comment section because everyone is very nice, and that is not typical of a YouTube comment section. So, like, thanks for that. And thanks for hanging out with me this spoiler season, bearing with me, you know, through the technical difficulties and all that. There's a few more spoiler videos to come. We're not done yet, so hang in there. We're going to keep kicking them out. I just really want to say again that I appreciate all you guys for hanging out on the couch with me through these tough times in content creation. But aside from that, I'm done for this one. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.